we're just speaking to Linda in Lincoln about the 20th of May. She's coming down to the Royal Courts of Justice. I'll be there as well. There'll be a lot of people there. Can you tell us the importance of people coming? Why it's so important that people come to the Royal Courts of Justice on the 20th of May?
Look, this is the decisive decision. Julian had a court hearing back in February, and he could have been extradited then, but the courts decided that they needed so-called assurances from the United States before they could do that. And so on the 20th of May, they will decide whether they accept the US assurances. Now, I know Julian's case has gone on for quite a long time, very long time, sorry. He's been in Belmarsh prison for over 5 years as he's been fighting the extradition battle. But every time there's a decisive court case where Julian is just one decision away from being extradited, the fact that he's not extradited is a victory. And I believe that because this is a political case, it is because the courts have found it very difficult to do so. And why do they find it difficult to do so? Because the public sentiment around this case, of course, has an influence on the outcome. And Julian's greatest defense is the support of the public.
Yeah, and I mean, can you tell us about these assurances? Because I'm a bit confused about what they've given assurances on. Is that? I mean, I don't want to ruin the case that you might have when you go into the court, but what have the US given assurances on?
Well, the court, it's extremely curious. So on the 20th of February, what we called Day X, we were expecting the outcome of that case to be either he's allowed to bring an appeal to the High Court or it will be rejected. We only expected one of two outcomes. And instead, the court did something highly unusual, which was to say, well, he has provisional permission to appeal to the High Court, but that conditional permission will be reversed if we're satisfied by what the US tells us. And what they asked the US to do was what was rejected, was what was argued in court. It had to do with the death penalty, and it had to do with Julian's access to constitutional protections that Americans are able to invoke in court. And the US, in its extradition arguments in Julian's case, have said that because he's Australian, he's not American, and because the alleged accusations of publishing evidence of war crimes occurred outside the United States, then he doesn't have access to the US Constitution. And the two High Court judges found this problematic. So they asked the lawyers for the US about it in court, and the barristers at the High Court that represented the US were not able to give to satisfy the judges during the legal arguments. And so that's why the judges then went in their decision. They said, well, Assange has a good chance of being successful in his arguments on these 2 points, unless the US executive writes a letter to say that we shouldn't worry. And so the form of those assurances was that he would not be exposed to the death penalty. And this is quite curious because that's an understatement. The Home Secretary, just as a normal thing in extraditions, would ask for the US to give an assurance on death penalty, but they didn't in this case. And so the courts have gone to the US directly and said, well, this is a standard assurance. We want it. And it's quite telling that the Home Secretary didn't even bother to ask for this assurance, but the court is very concerned that this is a possibility. And so they asked for assurance about that. And then secondly, they asked for an assurance about this access to First Amendment protection. So this is the freedom of speech protection, which is what, in order to mount a defense, you need to be able to invoke constitutional protections on freedom of speech. Now, Julian is accused under a piece of legislation that potentially bars that kind of defense anyway, but not on the basis of nationality. And what the US has argued is that there's an additional bar for him invoking freedom of speech, which is his nationality. And that is prohibited under the Extradition Act of the UK 2003. So what the US has gone on to do is write a letter. Sorry, I'm giving a little bit of detail, but
I think it's important that people hear the detail.
yeah.
Just a couple of things on this. That there was a hope that the Australians have made an appeal to the US, and Biden said something along the lines of, I'm considering it. But I just realized that the US response to the appeal for assurances was after Biden had said he's thinking about it. Does that sound like Biden isn't thinking about it?
Well, I'm not in Biden's shoes. I think the statement that he was thinking about it got quite a lot of attention in the press, and I think that's because it's the first sign of a that it's not a brick wall, that actually Julian's case is highly controversial, and we know this. I know this. We know this. That internally in the U.S. administration for many years, and the different administrations, this case has been seen as a very dangerous case that has there's a before and an after if it's pursued. And so even within the US administration, the Biden administration, there are internal voices saying this thing should go away. So I think Biden's comment reflected what we already know are voices of dissent within the administration. So it's important, I think, for us in the UK to understand that public outcry about this case does have an impact, because it is a huge inconvenience for the United States, a huge, even bigger inconvenience, I think, for the UK in its dealings internationally, when it goes to summits and the UN and so on, because Julian's case is brought up regularly. It is a very important, hot political issue. It's a hot potato for both the UK and the US, and we need to keep up that outcry. And for us in the UK, it is about showing up on the 20th, because Julian is just one decision away from extradition. If the courts accept the US letter of non-assurances, then he will be put on a plane, and yes, he will try to go to the European Court of Human Rights and ask for the European Court of Human Rights to stop his extradition. That is not a guaranteed means of stopping it, and we hope that the UK courts stop it before, because it's a very high risk and a very serious risk that Julian could be taken to the United States within 24 hours of the decision on the 20th if it goes against him. Of course, we say that the US non-assurances are completely ridiculous. If you look at them, the wording has been leaked. They're not assurances at all. And they don't respond to what the UK, what the High Court was asking for. So even, a plain reading of this letter, the court should go in Julian's direction. But the fact is that the stakes are so high, and Julian could be sent to the United States. If he loses, if the European Court of Human Rights doesn't stop the UK from extraditing him, then he could be in the United States within 1 or 2 days after the 20th. And people showing up on the 20th is crucial. We need to show the world and those who have Julian's fate in their hands that this cannot go on, that this is ridiculous. The Australian government has said that they have the expectation that he will be released, and the Australian government is the one that's interfacing with the United States, but they need the boost of public opinion constantly in order to give them a platform to be able to continue to advocate for Julian's release.
Yeah. And I need to ask you, because I'm sure everyone's wondering, how is Julian at the moment? When was the last time you saw him? How's he doing?
I saw him this week. I'm trying to think which day. I think it was Wednesday. And he's extremely stressed. He has trouble sleeping. This date is rushing towards us. It's only 8 days away, the 20th of May. And we simply don't know what will happen after. But I insist, every time Julian wins or has some kind of half win, he doesn't lose at this stage where he's just one decision away. That is a win, and we have to keep on, the fact that he's close to extradition but not being extradited. I take this as a political signal, actually, and we need to push and push until he's free. And I think his freedom could be close if we continue to keep up the pressure.
Just to sort of clarify a little bit, if they rule that he should not be extradited, would that mean that there'd be no reason to retain him, keep him in Belmarsh at all?
That's right. The UK has not brought any charges against Julian. He's not serving any sentence. The only thing keeping him from being a free man is the extradition request from the United States. And it's a critical moment also in the United States. They're close to an election. This case has gone on for over 5 years. There could be just a decision to end it somehow, to drop it, or whatever they might be thinking. But it could be very close, and all these different things, of course, need to come together. And there's also a lot of political distractions. So Julian could be very close to release if all factors came together.
And that would be amazing if we could all get down there on the 20th and be there when a judgment is made that maybe Julian can be released. And then it would be the best thing we could celebrate for a long time. And it'd be great to see you with Julian again and the children with him. It must be heartbreaking for you to not have him around, and I hope everyone can go on the 20th and tell everyone else that to go on the 20th. And I appreciate you coming on, Stella. You've probably got hundreds of other interviews to do, and it's great to see you, and the artwork's great. My son does a bit like that as well, but I think yours have gone up a level. Their colour use is a bit more advanced. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.